Techlandia is recorded at the Central Office on the East Side in Portland. Central Office is a one-stop for all your office or meeting needs. Check them out at centraloffice.com. Welcome to Techlandia, a podcast about and for the technology industry, a place to learn, connect, and engage with leaders and thinkers involved in the technology industry. You can check us out at techoregon.org, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Thank you for listening and enjoy the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Techlandia, TAO's regular podcast series. Today, we're really excited to have as our guest David Kirshbaum, who's principal strategist with Vital Message. My name is Skip Newberry, president and CEO of TAO, and we're excited to get underway. So, David, thanks for being here. Thanks for taking the time, and welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Skip.
Well, I thought it'd be good to get into a little bit of background on you professionally, and I was wondering if you could take a minute maybe to kind of walk through your professional journey for our listeners, and then get into some interesting meaty topics about the intersection of communication strategies, AI, sustainability. We've got a lot to talk about in a short period of time. So without further ado, why don't you take us through kind of your professional journey to date?
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks, Skip. So I guess I'll start by saying that I'm a lifelong environmentalist and someone who sort of has a vision and desire for a better world, I suppose. One where people can thrive in sort of balance with our natural world. And so that's framed a lot of my career path. In regards to like communication strategy, I'd say that really kicked off between like 10 to 12 years ago. I started a company at one point, an e-commerce company, and grew that for a while before deciding it wasn't really what I wanted to be doing. And I had more learning to do. Joined an entrepreneurial training company as a coach, advising other entrepreneurs and learning a lot more about the ins and outs of strategic communications, copywriting, marketing. And from there, I branched out on my own and started my own, communications company, doing a mix of copywriting for more like direct sales and marketing purposes, as well as ghostwriting, helping experts clarify and convey their most important messages that they were trying to get out to have the impact they wanted and grow their businesses. And I took a not a like change of direction, but like a more focus of direction into the climate tech world a couple of years ago, as I learned that it was a thing that was happening and kind of growing very quickly, which was very exciting for me. And that's where I've been focusing a lot of my attention the last couple of years, growing my network, working with startup leaders and colleagues across a range of industries, disciplines, skill sets, and trying to, I guess, develop my theories further around what is needed to move sustainability solutions forward. And a lot of it comes down to communication, relationships, influence, messaging, and even thinking, and how we're thinking about things, at least as much as anything technological. And that's really, my current journey is continuing to learn as quickly as I can about that world, and lately expanding that even further beyond just the climate crisis to what is, very smart people that have studied this in depth are calling a meta crisis, which is really a crisis of mindset, thinking, and the thinking behind the systems that we are all engaged in, and how that is resulting in climate change, biodiversity loss, extreme weather, global economic systems starting to fray at the edges and break down. And AI is has a big role to play in that. A lot of people are very excited about it and see it as a possible way out, or like a savior, or it's gonna like make everything better. And there's that potential, but there's also a lot of people sounding alarms and calling for some slowdown and some rethinking about what are we really doing here, and do we really even know what we're doing or why. So that's where I'm coming from to this conversation, and not coming as I would say a deep subject matter expert, just someone who's always curious, learning, and trying to put these pieces together so that I can have some kind of positive impact for the people around me, the clients, colleagues, the world. Bringing that world into being that I have always sort of longed for, and I think a lot of people do.
That's great. I mean, I think there's few topics that are as kind of meta as you described it. In terms of their scope and complexity than something like climate change or AI. And here you are thinking about both of them. I was wondering, when a couple of years ago when you started to pay more attention to climate technology, what are some of the things you noticed or observed about how that particular industry sector talked about itself? How did it describe the problem and kind of the reason why it mattered? Did you find that to be effective, or were there certain gaps in messaging and how people framed the issues?
Yeah, that's a big question. I'll start, I guess, by saying when I first started learning about climate tech, I was very excited, and I actually shared this whole journey in a TEDx talk about a year ago now, up in across the river in Vancouver, Washington. And I just started seeing how to really change our economy away from the destructive path that it's been on, which is because it's tied to fossil fuels, and fossil fuel extraction and burning is what, a lot of what is causing climate change and biodiversity loss, et cetera. But to change our economy away from that reliance on fossil fuels, so much has to change, because it's, energy is sort of the biggest thing everybody looks at, but it's also, materials. Anything made of plastic is also coming from that industry. Chemicals, like so much of what we sort of rely on has been and remains dependent on the fossil fuel industry. And so what excited me was that there were all these brilliant technologists, thinkers, engineers, academics looking at all these nuanced places throughout our society and our economy to work on, okay, well, how do in this little discrete area, how do we change from a fossil fuel basis to something different, something that is sustainable and won't lead to turning our planet into Venus or whatever. And part of what excited me was it is focused on solutions, rather than, or in addition to, I guess I should say, sort of the activist, like argumentation. Maybe that's not a fair word. I guess a lot of my former environmentalism was in sort of the activist mode, and I think that is still very important, and I really appreciate and applaud anyone who's taking like a moral stand and trying to get anyone in positions of power to make changes. But this seemed more, it seemed like an important addition in working on solutions rather than just policy or fighting against what is, but actually creating something new. So in terms of, you asked about sort of messaging and gaps, where I have tried to focus my, I guess my skill set or my understanding from a marketing communication standpoint is that a lot of what climate tech and the environmental sustainability movement in general struggles with effective messaging. It tends to be a little focused on itself rather than the sort of perspective of the people that it needs to connect with and influence, and take more of a moral stand, or in the case of climate tech, kind of a technologist, like a technical stand, that neither of which necessarily land with the people that are either going to be the customers or the partners or the investors or the policymakers that need to get on board. So the sort of argument that I've been trying to bring forward in different ways and write about and consult about is really understanding who it is that you need to talk to on all the different camps, all the different constituents and stakeholders, getting a really deep understanding of what motivates them, and then finding the overlap between what you're about, your goals, your vision, your values, your technology, your solution, and the mental frames and desires of those other constituents, and find where that overlap is and make that the focus of your messaging. And that's, in a nutshell, what I tend to talk about.
No, that's great. I mean, one way to kind of be part of that or describe it differently would be, more of adopting a customer mindset. But that's kind of a sales speak.
Right.
I think in other cases it's empathy. It's doing some research ahead of time to get sort of in the shoes, if you will, of the people that you're trying to reach and engage with and influence. And
Yes.
yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that seems, when you describe it, it seems clear and obvious, and yet, having worked with a lot of startup founders over a decade plus, you see again and again kind of the old adage of technology in search of a problem. It's not that the technology was developed completely devoid of any thought to a problem. It's just that sometimes it's the messaging that causes a breakdown or disconnect there. And I think often talking to technologists and folks who are inherently problem solvers, they're like, shouldn't it be obvious, what I've done and the value that it has?
Right.
As opposed to, no, you need to actually sometimes help carry people along, meet them where they are and then help them understand how it solves their core priority problem that they're facing day to day. But yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, the reason I asked about sustainability in climate tech first is, that's an area that I think has been particularly challenging for folks to kind of see change happen at the speed at which they would like to. And I think, now with AI coming on the scene too, with artificial intelligence, it's a big, complex, not easily defined sort of set of technologies. And I'm wondering if you're seeing similarities in what you saw before with climate tech, and does it kind of face some of the same issues, or is it different in some ways?
I guess maybe I'm not quite understanding your question or where you're coming from. I see it as a related topic, but a different sort of set of problems. Well, and potential benefits too.
Tell me more about both the problems and benefits that you're seeing that are distinct.
Yeah. So we talked briefly before we started recording about sort of the business communications sort of level of framing, and then more like the global societal level. At the business level, part of the issue for the sustainability climate camp is that the the fossil fuel industry has loads of money and decades of experience and the best, best minds in the world around like influence, PR, propaganda, as well as like deep ties to policymakers and institutions. And so they have this whole infrastructure and resource base that's like well established and has framed the conversation around energy, climate, environment for a very long time. So they're kind of this entrenched power, and which is not to say that the industry is just evil, but it has used its power to perpetuate and grow its power. And sustainability movement doesn't have the resources, doesn't seem to still have the understanding at a broad level of the psychology of influence. And so it's fighting a very difficult battle to get its message across, and that's been further complicated by just what's happened in our society and our politics, kind of the breakdown of civil discourse, the dehumanizing of along party lines, or left versus right, or progressive versus conservative, that are really kind of manufactured falsehoods that kind of fly in the face of the fact that a lot of us really want the same things in terms of just the ability to live a good life and have a healthy planet to live on. But so bringing it back to AI, I think that AI can help to level that field a bit because of its ability to scale and automate messaging. So it can give someone who doesn't have the resources of a multi-trillion-dollar industry the opportunity, if used effectively, to get important messages out in a bigger way. There are, of course, downsides for businesses. It can produce a lot of errors. There's built-in biases. There's issues around like data protection. If you're using sort of a cloud-based system like ChatGPT, and you feed it like anything proprietary, you're kind of losing that proprietariness. And even like business model protection, like AI enables an individual or small groups to kind of just take whatever information they can get about company or industry and basically mimic it and create a competitor that can very quickly take market share. So there's it's a weird and getting weirder world in terms of even just that sort of business strategic level of AI potentials and use cases and dangers, and that doesn't even get into the sort of global or societal level stuff.
Right. And do you see this kind of tension, if you will, with AI technologies on the one hand, holding so much promise in terms of what you can do with them, yet at the same time, there's this massive increase in demand for energy resources that demand, right? And so it's like you can kind of hold like two ideas in your head at the same time. Yes, AI is potentially holding great promise for our ability to address climate issues because of the compute power that it brings to bear, but that compute power also has costs related to climate in the form of increasing energy consumption. And so it's, how do you think about those sort of points of tension, if you will, and do you see a path forward from a messaging standpoint, and kind of how those things can be kind of reconciled?
It's a great question. It's a great point. And I've been aware of the energy consumption issue for a while now, at least the last year. And I just recently, really in researching for this podcast, came across some pretty poignant arguments, and a lot of it centering around something called the Jevons paradox, which, in my very limited understanding, I'll say has to do with the tendency of advances in technology that are meant or espoused to improve situations, actually just contributing to the growth of the problem. And so, for example, efficiency increases can lead to net gains in consumption unless there's some kind of incentives or rules put in place to limit growth, which most people don't want. So, for example, energy efficiency in just machines, appliances, etc., has grown. I think something like 36% over a couple few decades, but at the same time, energy consumption, even I think even accounting for population growth has risen by like double that. As an example, also we can see like clean energy has grown massively in recent years, and the last decade or two, but fossil fuel production has continued rising also, and it's pointing to the sort of values underpinnings of the system that is based on ongoing, never-ending growth. And if that's the basis of everything, then any gains in efficiency or solving for one problem will just continue the growth path, which is an earth destructive path. With AI in particular, in addition to having a lot of use cases for climate solutions through things like pipeline monitoring is one, or more efficient use of or like monitoring and control of energy flows and demands through like virtual power plants, things like that. But it's also being used to enhance oil and gas exploration and extraction, and which ties back in with the fact that those are on the rise still, even though they're the thing that we need to cut dramatically, rapidly, and if we want to address the climate crisis. So
yeah, that's a good point. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, and I'm so some thought leaders I'm listening to that are thinking these things through, and have been for quite a while. There's the arguments they make are just, they feel true, they feel sound, a lot more so than the arguments of how much it's going to help coming from people who are making money with it, which a lot of people are for now. But yeah, that's it's a lot of what I'm looking at. Yeah, but tying it back to energy, it is like kind of eating up all the energy that we're currently producing, and everything that we're building in terms of sort of clean energy, as well as the expansion of fossil fuels. Like we're already at the limits of producing enough for what we need for current needs, let alone like the growing human use and the growing data center use for AI. It seems like it's outpacing what we're going to be able to achieve. And I heard a claim recently also that even if we do switch to a clean energy economy, that takes a tremendous amount of minerals, and we don't actually have enough minerals, even if like deep seabed mining happens at full scale, which a lot of people don't think is a good idea, and I would put myself in that camp. There's not enough critical minerals to sustain that for more than like a generation, is the claim that I heard in some of the experts that I'm following. So it all points to not being sustainable if we are trying to use this very highly energy consumptive technology, AI, to just further essentially what we're doing now, which is growth at all costs.
Right. Yeah, it's an interesting set of observations there. I mean, do you see a path forward? And what does that involve? Does it involve regulating or incentivizing certain types of uses of technology, let's say legislatively,
Mm.
um, and also, I guess, investing in and resourcing, gains in efficiency and innovation related to how AI technology works? I mean, is it a yes and all the above? Like what do you see as you look at the horizon? Like, what are some possible paths forward there, do you think?
Yeah, I definitely cannot claim to know a path forward. What seems inevitable is that what we're doing, like the system that we are in, have been in for many decades now, is not sustainable, and in the sense of it can't be sustained. It's going to change pretty radically sooner or later, and probably sooner. So I was listening to a conversation on a podcast with a couple of um, like global economists, finance experts, pointing to some of the, like I mentioned, the fraying edges of the global economy, and they were talking more in depth about what that's looking like, and where they think we're headed, and um, they were pointing out um, that the current system is basically one of the that subjugates most of us to basically the central government, Wall Street, the uber wealthy elite, um, and that's sort of the basis of the market, and that's failing, and will fail everyone, including those that are supposedly sort of supported by it, that I just mentioned, and they're saying that's what's needed, is really to flip that on its head, um, and have the Wall Street and sort of those markets tied to service of the greater good. But to do that is politically and culturally very difficult at this point, and not even guaranteed to work. And on a similar note, looking at the sort of climate, um, I guess the climate lens, and how that interfaces with the market, the economy. Um, it's They were talking about it being sort of money at the top, and a few stages, technology, politics, and at the bottom, it's kind of the earth, which is just turned into capital resources in the current system, and that needs to be flipped on its head, where everything is in service to maintaining this biosphere that we are part of and rely on. And I fully agree with that, and that's kind of been my sort of natural view and tendency for most of my life. Um, but again, to do that is a huge radical change, that how we go about that. Um, I don't have an answer. I know a lot of people more technically steeped in it are working on it and have theories. But how AI fits into that is, if we don't change the fundamental sort of models and the thinking behind them, and what we value and what we prioritize, AI will it will just speed up. It will accelerate whatever we're doing. So if we don't change that consciousness underpinning, then the net effect will not be what is hoped for.
There was a book that a friend of mine recommended to me earlier this summer called Material World by Ed Conway. And it essentially talks about 6 raw materials that have helped shape modern civilization over hundreds of years,
Mm-hmm.
and will likely continue to going forward. But you kind of hit the nail on the head in terms of the thesis of the book around all of these kind of paradoxes, I guess, in
Yeah.
terms of, the path forward or the means by which we can, solve climate change or address it, and has also some significant climate trade-offs associated with it in terms of the inputs, whether it's the clean energy transformation. It still requires some pretty dirty practices and
Yeah.
material extraction from the earth. And, it's I don't think we have any easy choices going forward, and to your point
No.
earlier, this brings us back to how we started the conversation. I think, where do you see more nuance in terms of communication strategy that's necessary? Because, you started off saying, like, initially climate activism kind of drove you to kind of this moral positioning, but then you found, okay, this approach, this narrative isn't necessarily affecting change or having the impact that I'd like to see in the time frame I'd like to see it.
Yeah.
Do you see a role for communication strategy going forward and helping people understand some of the nuances or trade-offs, or how, like, I was wondering if you could spend a few minutes talking about your thoughts there.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I have ideas, but it's there's no like simple solution. It's about relationships. It's about psychology and understanding. It's about empathy, as you brought up, um, and it's about clarity, and it's about values. So yes, I think communication strategy is incredibly important. At least as important as anything we're doing technologically, because I mean, communication is how everything happens. It's the underpinning of all trade, all business, all society. Um, so I think businesses are in a unique position because, we're in this capitalist structure that is sort of has these perverse incentives. I've heard them termed, and sort of flipped on its head value systems of what will actually support the greater good. So businesses are existing within that system. We're all existing within that system. But businesses have however big they are or small they are, they have some power to influence, beyond what most individuals can do. The way that those economic tides sort of flow. And so I think what's critical for businesses is to, for business leaders, because businesses are made up of people, despite our corporate personhood, legal standing, business leaders need to really be clear on their values, what they stand for, what they want to see in the world, get real with themselves about how what they're doing is impacting the world around them. Like, intention is one thing, but what really is the impact, and is it what you think it is? Are there blind spots? Are there ways that you're exacerbating problems that are problems? So just, I think, greater clarity, which ironically, using AI can help do that to some extent, just as a sort of a thought partner. Although I certainly caution against outsourcing too much thinking to AI. But so knowing yourself, knowing what you stand for, and being real about what you're doing and its impact, real or potential or intended or not. And then, like I said before, interfacing that, or integrating that, aligning it with a deep understanding of who are the most important people for you to communicate with, which means you have to decide who are the most important people for you to communicate with. For example, a lot of people that I talk to, like I have a Substack newsletter that I'll, shameless plug. It's called Tell the Future, and it's about these kind of topics. And I've been interviewing people for that, as well as a book that it's leading to with my co-author, Kate Wubach. But a lot of people I talk to in the climate space are saying, like, just don't think that if you want to have an impact on climate that you need to focus on climate in your messaging. Focus on what matters to the people that you're talking to. If they're worried about saving money, if they're worried about having, in the case of like a consumer, a B2C company, like if your consumers, your customers are interested in a particular trend, or they just want something that works better, focus on that, and make your thing in a way that it leads to a more sustainable society and like solves a problem for people, but focus on those immediate benefits, immediate concerns, and yeah, know your audience, whoever it is. And the same is true for investors, for partners. Some people that you're going to interface with are going to have more of like a self-centered stance, and they're just interested in what they're interested in. Some are going to have a more broader based view or a more values stance, and you have to know where they're coming from. And that's the job of communications strategies, to understand that and align your core, your values, your goals with those of the people that you need to have relationships with to achieve anything.
Well, I just want to say thank you for spending some time with us and sharing some of your insights and wisdom. These are some huge, kind of meaty topics, and I feel like you've done a really interesting job just kind of deconstructing some of them and making them a little bit more accessible, I think, in many respects. So I definitely encourage folks to check out your app. And like you're spending some time diving into a lot of these weighty issues, and I really appreciate it. I know I enjoyed our conversation, and we'll be taking away some tips and some new approaches to things. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I really appreciate you having me on, Skip, and I'll shout out to Tim Winter as well for making the connection. I would like to just do a quick shout out to a couple of resources that I've been learning from. Two podcasts, one called The Great Simplification and another one called Entangled World. Highly recommend checking them out. They're covering a lot of these topics and bringing in some of the best thinkers in the world to dive into specific areas. And in terms of, for business leaders wanting to look at a shift of mindset and consciousness, the Hugh Person Project with Jill Taylor and Daniel Goodenough, who actually met through Tim. They're doing some incredible work at this very deep philosophical but pragmatic level that highly recommend checking out.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Well, that's a wrap. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thank you.